He thought humiliating me at my own daughter's wedding would make him look untouchable. Right there, in front of hundreds of guests and even his top boss, Lucas Clark smirked and said words I will never forget. "This is my father-in-law. He's been unemployed for years, living off a pension in Tacoma." It sounded casual, even playful, but the sneer in his eyes told a different story. A ripple of muffled laughter spread through the room. Young men and women from Neurodyne AI, his colleagues, my former employees, shared knowing looks, amused by the humiliation. But what none of them realized was that the man Lucas mocked was one of the very founders of the company they so proudly worked for. I tightened my hand around the glass at the banquet table, forcing my composure. A father dreams of his daughter's wedding day being filled with joy, with music, with a future unfolding like a bright sunrise. Instead, the first sound that morning was a blade disguised as a joke, cutting into me before the ceremony even began. My daughter Isabella, standing radiant in her ivory gown, kept her smile for the guests, but her eyes betrayed her. Eyes that once sparkled when I carried her on my shoulders to the park now flickered with unease. She heard the insult. She knew. Yet love has a way of silencing reason, convincing itself that cruelty is just humor. Lucas wasn't done. He turned to me, patting my shoulder with a patronizing air, his voice deliberately louder. "My father-in-law here has nothing to worry about. He's enjoying retirement, but me? I've got everything ahead. Neurodyne AI is about to make its next big leap, and I'll be regional director within a year." Applause, chuckles, murmurs. It was the performance he wanted. I gave him only the faintest nod in return, but inside, every boast he made fueled the fire in my chest. Because Lucas Clark, the man so proud of his looming promotion, had no idea the career he worshipped rested on foundations I had built with my own hands. His arrogance was not just offensive, it was fatal. If you're listening, remember this moment. The very second Lucas tried to use humiliation as a ladder, he had already placed one foot on the rung that would snap beneath him. Before I tell you how that wedding unraveled, let me pause to thank you, the one hearing this story now. If this tale makes you think, makes you reflect, then hit subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. Your support is what drives me to keep exposing truths people would rather bury. That's how my daughter's wedding began. Not with vows or blessings, but with a smirk, a public insult, and a silent resolve. Silence, however, can be dangerous, because silence, when sharpened by truth, becomes the storm no one sees coming. But the wedding was not the beginning of Lucas's arrogance. There was a night before it all, a night burned into my memory at the Blue Heron Grill, an upscale restaurant overlooking Lake Union. The golden lights reflected off polished wood, the air carried the low hum of a cello, and white linen tables glowed under chandeliers. It was there that Lucas chose to officially introduce himself to me. Isabella sat beside him, her happiness so bright it made me wish, if only for a second, that the man she loved could be worthy of her. She looked at him with pride, introducing him with the kind of joy every father hopes his daughter will one day find. But before the first glass of wine was poured, Lucas leaned forward, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Isabella told me you're, currently between opportunities, right? Like, semi-retired, but still wanting to dabble in something for fun." I blinked once. Between opportunities, a polished phrase meant to soften the truth, to frame me as nothing but a relic. "I'm retired," I answered, my tone calm, steady, as I placed the napkin across my lap. Lucas's smile widened, but his eyes? They never changed. "Of course, retirement suits you at this stage. The key is health and small pleasures. Leave the heavy lifting to our generation," Lucas Clark said, his tone dripping with condescension. My fingers gripped the glass tighter, yet I smiled faintly, letting him continue. When the waiter arrived with menus, Lucas ordered seared salmon with truffle mushroom risotto, Isabella chose herb-roasted chicken, and I simply said, Seafood soup and a sandwich, please." The flicker of surprise in Lucas's eyes was brief but unmistakable. He raised an eyebrow as if my choice were a revelation. Isabella blushed. "Dad, today's special. Don't you want something else?" "I like soup," I replied, calm. Lucas forced a laugh, waving dismissively. "It's fine, Isabella. Everyone has their own budget. Some people prefer simple meals. I totally get it." The word budget struck the table like a whip. In that single syllable, he tried to compress my entire life into a morsel of perceived insignificance. I shifted the topic. "The company you work for, Neurodyne, what's its focus in AI?" His chest puffed like a peacock. "I'm senior manager of sales. In 3 years, I increased revenue over 40%. Neurodyne leads the enterprise machine learning market. I expect to become regional director within a year." "Sounds busy," I said softly. "Well, any success demands sacrifice," he replied, firm, almost rehearsed. "Our generation knows that. In your time, business was simpler. Today, you must adapt constantly, break old rules, or become dead weight." I heard it. Dead weight. Isabella laid her hand on his, forcing a nervous smile. "Lucas is just passionate about his work." I set my spoon down, metal ringing faintly against the bowl. "That's right," I said, nodding. "In today's world, survival is a battle for the strong." Lucas didn't notice the edge in my voice. He pressed on, oblivious. "Older people can't adapt, stuck in old ways. Me? I'm the new generation, fresh ideas. That's why Neurodyne needs people like me, not relics of the past." I thought back 30 years. Me, in a tiny cafe, dreaming of an AI empire. Charles Lang and I, surviving long nights, debts piling, near bankruptcy, everything we built by sheer will. And here was Lucas, feasting on truffle risotto, calling us dead weight. I smiled, not with pleasure, but with clarity. Arrogance blinded him. Blindness walks straight into traps. That night in the parking lot, Isabella hugged me tightly. "Dad, he's full of himself, but he really loves me." I stroked her hair. "Sweetheart, people reveal their true character when they think they're on top. Remember that." She turned away, holding Lucas's hand, but worry flickered in her eyes. Alone, I drove through the shadowed streets of Seattle. Anger had faded. Only one thing remained: cold calculation. At home, I didn't turn on the lights. I let darkness wrap the living room, listening to the pendulum clock strike each hollow beat, as if counting down to inevitability. Lucas's words, dead weight, had cooled my fury. What remained was stillness, a patience sharpened by storms, knowing truth, wielded at the right moment, can crush any facade. I rose and entered my sanctuary, the study. On dark wood-paneled walls hung memories. The red brick building where Charles Lang and I launched Neurodyne AI in 1993. The first product launch when my hair was black, eyes burning with fire. The Forbes cover in 2017 naming me the quiet architect of AI. Opening the desk drawer, I pulled out yellowed papers, the certificate of incorporation atop the pile, signatures of Charles and me scrawled at the bottom. A reminder that the greatest achievements often start in cramped rooms with impossible dreams. My eyes lingered on a photo in Charles's garage, a snapshot of ambition, sweat, and a future only I could see. We were barely past 30, surviving on 18-hour days, collapsing on cold cement floors, nights when the money ran out, credit cards declined, and outsiders thought we were insane. Yet those nights forged Neurodyne AI, the very foundation upon which Lucas Clark now strutted, oblivious to the blood and sweat behind it. I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. Charles Lang picked up on the second ring. "Nathan, long time no see. How was dinner with the future son-in-law?" "Interesting," I replied evenly. "And the company? How's it holding up?" Charles chuckled. Nathan as ever, busy, chaotic, but running on the foundation we built. By the way, have you heard of Lucas Clark? Sales guy, making a lot of noise, praised by the board for his numbers. My grip on the phone tightened. I've met him. There was surprise in Charles's voice. Met him? He's got these so-called reform ideas, calls it business model innovation. Ambition or arrogance? Hard to tell. Always talking about cutting dead weight. You know what I mean. Right? I closed my eyes. Dead weight. The exact words Lucas spat at me just hours earlier. I understood. He didn't know me. After Neurodyne's rise, I deliberately vanished from the public eye. Charles was the face of the company. I stayed behind, strategizing, researching. For decades, I shaped every move, but my name, Nathaniel Whitmore, faded from headlines. That anonymity became the perfect mask. Lucas saw only a retired old man, unaware of the empire I had built. A pause on the other end. Then Charles asked quietly, "Nathan, what are you thinking?" I glanced at the framed photos on the wall. Young faces of the original team. Faces Lucas had dismissed as obsolete. "I think," I said slowly, "some lessons young men can only learn the hard way." Charles laughed uneasily. "Don't tell me you're plotting something." "I don't need to do much," I said. "I'll let him reveal himself." The wedding. It will be the perfect stage. Silence hung for a moment. Then Charles sighed. "If anyone can teach him that lesson, it's you, Nathan. But remember, Isabella will feel it most." "I know," I whispered. "It's because of my daughter that I must." I hung up and sank into the worn leather chair. Anger had vanished. Only certainty remained. Lucas believed I was a useless, retired man, clinging to scraps of dignity, unaware I had written the very codes and strategies that built the empire he now worshipped. I took a blank sheet and wrote down every word he had said. Between opportunities, hobbies, budget, dead weight. Each was evidence, a future indictment. Outside, Lake Union mirrored the city lights in deceptive calm, but in this room, a storm had been planted. A storm that would sweep away not just a wedding, but a career built on arrogance. The next morning, sunlight glinted off Tacoma rooftops. A familiar knock interrupted my thoughts. Isabella entered carrying a steaming cup of coffee, her face still shadowed by last night's tension. She set the cup on my desk, where photos and old documents lay. "Dad," she began, voice low, "I need to ask directly, why do you let Lucas believe you're just a retired old man?" I looked into her blue eyes, seeing a reflection of myself 30 years ago, determined, yet laced with worry. I drew a deep breath. "I didn't lie, Isabella. I just didn't tell the whole truth." "That's still lying," she shot back. "I saw the photos in your study, the Forbes article calling you the quiet architect of Neurodyne. I know you're not useless like he thinks, so why let him humiliate you? Why let me sit there, unable to defend you?" I walked to the window, gazing at the small garden where Isabella had tended roses as a child. "Sweetheart," I said, "life isn't fair. People judge by appearances, a bowl of soup, a suit, but it's in those very moments that true character reveals itself. If Lucas had shown even a shred of respect, even thinking I had nothing, I might have felt safe giving you to him. But you saw. He chose a different path," I said, voice low but sharp. Isabella clenched her fists. "You're testing him, even when I'm the one most affected." I turned to meet her eyes, steady and unflinching. "Yes, because of you, I must. Love can blind, Isabella, but disrespect, especially toward family, destroys everything. I won't let you pay the price for a broken marriage later." Tears welled in her eyes. "You were absent so many years. When Mom was sick, at graduation. Always buried in Neurodyne. I forgave you, thinking it was for my future. But now, when you finally stand beside me, why choose silence? Why let people insult you?" Her words pierced deeper than any barb Lucas Clark had thrown. I remembered the nights spent in that garage, missing birthdays, lost in ambition. I remembered my wife's weary eyes before she passed, whispering, "Promise me you'll be there for Isabella. Don't leave her alone." That promise still echoed in me. I placed my hand on Isabella's shoulder, voice hoarse but firm. I wasn't silent to surrender. I was silent so you could witness the truth for yourself. I wanted you to see how the man you plan to marry behaves when he believes no one important is watching. Isabella sobbed quietly, head bowed, tears dripping between clenched fingers. After a moment she lifted her gaze, red-rimmed but steady. "If that's the case, I'll keep the secret. But promise me one thing. Don't let this become revenge. I don't want my love crushed by pride." I nodded softly. "I promise, Isabella." "This isn't revenge, it's protection." She hugged me tightly, clinging to the father she had felt distant from for years. I closed my eyes, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. In that moment, I knew my path, thorny as it would be, was the right one. Morning sunlight spilled across blooming roses outside, yet inside, I knew I was stepping into a storm. Lucas Clark would soon learn the true cost of arrogance, but the tense morning did not tame him. In the weeks that followed, whenever we shared a table or visited their apartment, Lucas found new ways to jab, wrapping insult in patronizing smiles. One evening, Isabella made her creamy pasta, a recipe from college. Lucas praised her lavishly, then turned to me with a slick smile. "Would you like me to introduce you to some friends in the industry, Uncle Nathan? Maybe a small consulting role. Nothing too heavy, just enough to feel useful." His use of useful carried a chill, as if I were an old tool to be squeezed one last time. Isabella forced a smile, shifting the topic to home decor. I lifted my wine glass, took a slow sip, and said nothing. At a friend's birthday party, Lucas draped an arm around me in front of the crowd. "This is my future father-in-law, very composed, not buried in business like us. Plenty of time for hobbies, gardening, chess, the usual at his age." Polite laughter followed, but I could sense the pity layered beneath. Isabella blushed, pulling me aside, but Lucas beamed, basking in his perceived victory. The tipping point came one Sunday when Isabella invited her college friend Rachel over. Quick-witted, sharp-eyed, Rachel seemed to read through everything. As soon as we sat down, Lucas launched his performance, boasting about Neurodyne's upcoming projects, revenue numbers, and the board's likely consideration for his regional director promotion. Then, casually, maybe Uncle Nathan should attend a few startup conferences, at least to catch up with the trends. Just sitting at home, reading the paper, is a bit outdated, I said nothing. But Rachel's gaze pierced him, silently questioning what Isabella had never dared to ask. Every glance she threw my way seemed to challenge him, to measure the truth behind his arrogance. When Lucas Clark left the table to take a call, Rachel leaned toward Isabella, her voice just loud enough for me to hear. "Are you sure this is the man you'll give your life to?" "I don't see any respect for your father in his eyes," Isabella faltered, squeezing her friend's hand. I saw the war inside her, blind love for Lucas, and yet the instinctive trust in me, the father who had never been complacent, never ordinary. That night, as I walked Rachel to the door, I heard her whisper once more, "Uncle Nathan, please don't stay silent forever. Isabella needs to see the truth clearly." I smiled, neither confirming nor denying. In my mind, every smug line from Lucas, every pitying glance from the others, had already become pieces on the chessboard I was arranging. The curtain would not fall yet, but the trap was forming, and in his arrogance, Lucas remained oblivious. I had never plotted revenge before. My life taught me that time and truth were sufficient to deliver harsh lessons. But Lucas was different. He hadn't just insulted me. He had sown doubt in Isabella about the worth of her own father. That line could not be crossed. Early April, I drove to downtown Seattle. First stop, Armstrong and Company, the old tailor on Pine Street. In the three-way mirror, I studied my reflection in a new charcoal Italian wool suit with faint pinstripes, visible only when light grazed the fabric. The shop owner adjusted my shoulders, nodding. "Mr. Whitmore, this will give you gravitas without flash." Exactly what I wanted. No spectacle, yet commanding presence, enough that in the reception hall no eye could dismiss me. Next, I visited Cartwright Jewelers. A pair of platinum cufflinks engraved with the Neurodyne logo rested on black velvet, one of only two made. I fastened them to my sleeves, feeling a spark ignite. A flame of the past, recalling Charles Lang and me building an empire from scratch. Charles would recognize them instantly. Lucas, he would understand nothing until it was too late. The following day, I went to First National Bank. Jonathan Pierce, my longtime financial manager, raised his brows at the figure on the slip, $75,000. "Are you sure?" I signed firmly. "It's for Isabella's wedding." She should see with her own eyes that her father was never a burden. Jonathan handed me a cashier's check, bearing Isabella's and Lucas's names. I slid it into a thick envelope, placing it in my desk drawer beside a photo of my wife in her youth, her smile gentle, serene. But this day wasn't just for me. It needed witnesses. Those Lucas had labeled dead weight. I called Vivian Cho and Mark Davison, veteran engineers from Neurodyne's early days, both belittled by Lucas in meetings for being outdated. They arrived that afternoon, still radiating the quiet strength of a diligent generation. When I invited them to the wedding, their faces shifted from surprise to somber understanding. "If you need us to bear witness," Mark said, "we'll be there." At dusk, I walked alone along the brick path by Lake Union, watching ripples mirror the fiery hues of sunset. I thought of my wife, of how she used to cradle Isabella and tell me, "Let her grow up in respect." I hadn't fully kept that promise during my years buried in Neurodyne, but this time I would not fail. In my mind, every piece was in place: the charcoal suit, the platinum cufflinks, the $75,000 check, Vivian and Mark, all waiting for the perfect moment. And when that moment arrived, Lucas would find no escape. Back at my small Tacoma home that evening, I turned on the desk lamp in my study. The warm, yellow glow illuminated the items laid out for the big day. The storm was ready, and soon every arrogant word Lucas had uttered would come crashing down around him. I lowered myself into my chair, opened the worn leather notebook, and wrote a single line, deliberately terse: "Wedding Day. Final lesson." The rehearsal dinner was held at Emerald Bay Hall, a grand banquet room with towering ceilings. Crystal chandeliers scattered sharp reflections across immaculate white linens. It was the last gathering of both families before the wedding, and the perfect stage for Lucas Clark to flaunt his pride. I arrived early, clad in an old navy blazer with frayed cuffs, intentionally modest. As I stepped into the foyer, I spotted Lucas at the center of a circle of colleagues laughing loudly, glass of red wine in hand. Isabella stood beside him, radiant, yet her eyes flicked toward me repeatedly, as if silently warning him. "Here he is," Lucas called, voice cutting through the chatter. He looped an arm around my shoulders with the casual intimacy of a friend. "Everyone, meet my future father-in-law." He lives simply, without worry for work matters, a calm man enjoying his age in Tacoma. Polite chuckles circled the room, a few nodding as if my entire value had been neatly defined. I smiled faintly, slipped from under his arm, and took my seat. During dinner, he returned to his usual routine: last quarter's sales, guiding older employees in new tech, trimming outdated processes. Then, leaning closer, voice low but audible to the table, he said, "A career is like a high-speed train. If you can't keep up, it's best to get off early and make room for the young generation. His glance fixed on me, ensuring the weight of the insult landed. Lucas's mother, Margaret, sat at the head of the table, offering a saccharine, icy smile. Isabella is truly fortunate, marrying into a family with a bright future. As for your father, at least he won't be a burden. Isabella flushed, twisting her napkin. I gave her a subtle shake of my head. No reaction needed. Sugar-coated knives like these were familiar. When dessert arrived, Lucas leaned toward me again, lowering his voice like a conspiratorial counsel. Uncle Nathan, my boss, Mr. Charles Lang, will be there tomorrow. One of the most important figures at Neurodyne. You should mind your attire and words. Make an impression, just enough. I don't want any lack of finesse to affect my career. I set down my spoon, dabbed my lips, and looked him dead in the eye. My voice carried, low but deliberate, enough for the table to hear. Lucas, be careful with your judgments. Some things, once exposed, cannot be taken back silence. A pause that stretched painfully across the table. Lucas arched an eyebrow, then laughed, patting my hand lightly. Uncle Nathan, you're really something. I've never misjudged anyone. That's why I'm successful. I nodded, lips curving in a faint, controlled smile. Tomorrow will tell us if you are right or wrong. Under the crystal lights, Isabella watched me with quiet worry. Rachel, her best friend, furrowed her brow, as if she had just heard something heavier than a warning. The rehearsal night ended with laughter from Lucas's friends, yet inside me, a deep stillness grew, a calm before the storm. Tomorrow, the game Lucas believed he was winning would be overturned. Back at my small Tacoma house, the night before the wedding sank into silence. On my desk, every piece was ready, arranged with careful ritual. The charcoal suit from Armstrong and Company hanging neatly, sharp creases catching the lamp's glow, the black velvet box holding the platinum Neurodyne cufflinks, the tiny diamonds glinting like single stars breaking through clouds, the thick envelope containing the $75,000 check, my signature sweeping across it, a de-isabellation that I had never been dead weight. I sat in my old leather chair, flipping the pages of my notebook. On the newest page, I penned a few lines to Isabella. My daughter, if tomorrow my actions seem harsh, remember, they are born of love and duty. I don't want you to see only the gentle face of the man you love. I want you to see his shadow, too, so you can choose with both heart and reason. I folded the page, slipped it into a second envelope, and locked it in the drawer. That would be the final explanation if everything fell apart. My phone buzzed, a message from Isabella. Dad, I'm so worried. Lucas keeps repeating that his boss will be there tomorrow. I'm afraid when things happen, he'll hate you. I stared at it, long enough for the weight of the day to settle in. Then I replied evenly, Sweetheart, what matters is that you see clearly who you're marrying. If your love is strong enough, it will endure. If not, you need the truth. Sooner I placed the phone face down, leaving it unanswered. Stepping onto the porch, Seattle's night pressed cold against my skin, the chill from Lake Union brushing my spine. City lights shimmered faintly across the water, mirroring the tension coiled inside me. I inhaled deeply, letting the cold trace every nerve, and exhaled slowly. Tomorrow would not be just a wedding. It would be a public trial, where Lucas Clark would indict himself with the very arrogance he had displayed for months. Back in my study, I opened the velvet box again, sliding the platinum Neurodyne cufflinks onto the cuffs of a freshly pressed white shirt. Their tiny diamonds caught the desk lamp's glow like sparks from the past. I thought of Charles Lang, imagining him stepping into the reception hall, gaze immediately landing on the cufflinks, recognizing instantly that his co-founder was still in the game. And Lucas. He would realize nothing until the moment the truth struck in front of every guest. I returned the cufflinks to their box, locked it, and turned off the desk lamp. Darkness filled the room, save for the faint porch glow. I sat in silence, listening to my heartbeat, steady, deliberate, free of anger, free of fear. Only the cold composure of a man who held the entire board in his hands. When the clock struck midnight, I stood, straightened the curtains, and whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, the mask will fall, and my daughter will see, who truly deserves to walk beside her." Idinod the next morning, Seattle's sky was an almost impossibly clear blue. Golden sunlight pierced thin clouds, spilling over the glittering surface of Lake Union. I drove to the Harborview Hotel, where Isabella's wedding would be held, every step measured, solemn yet calm. The charcoal suit fit perfectly, polished black shoes tapping steadily across the marble lobby floor. Inside, the venue gleamed. White orchid sprays lined the aisle. A string quartet tuned, and colored glass panes scattered vibrant patches across the red carpet. Isabella emerged from the dressing room in her gown, a sheer veil shadowing half her face, yet her eyes glowed. When she saw me, she paused, then crossed the room and gripped my hand. "Dad," she whispered, "thank you for being here." I squeezed back, holding everything in. "You're beautiful today, Isabella, and whatever happens, you will always be my greatest pride." The chapel doors opened, the organ sounded. I guided Isabella down the aisle. Guests rose, turning as one. Every step etched into memory, heavy with pride and caution. Up front, Lucas stood in a black tuxedo, his smile gleaming, eyes fixed on Isabella with possession, not love. I brought my daughter to the steps where the minister waited. "Who gives this woman in marriage today?" His voice resonant. "I do, Nathaniel Whitmore. With all my love and hope," I replied. I placed Isabella's hand into Lucas's. For a brief moment, the three of us stood together before hundreds of witnesses. I met Lucas's gaze, confident, arrogant, still blind to the storm awaiting him. In the front row, Vivian Cho and Mark Davison, the veteran engineers I had invited, watched quietly, their eyes steady, ready for the hour that would define it all. Across the aisle, Margaret Clark sat with chin high, lips curling, a silent judge of my simple attire, certain it confirmed her disdain. The ceremony moved forward with formal grace. Isabella read her vows, trembling yet filled with feeling. Lucas read his, smooth, practiced, every word calculated, lacking genuine warmth. And then, as the minister declared them husband and wife, applause and the ringing of bells filled the room. But in the tension beneath the celebration, I knew. The true reckoning had just begun. I stood there, watching my daughter embrace her husband, Isabella, her laughter bright and unrestrained, a grown woman now choosing her own path. But beneath that joy, a fire of concern still smoldered in me. The main act, the reckoning, had not yet begun. The wedding ceremony was only the overture. The true climax would unfold in the reception, when Lucas Clark would meet Charles Lang, and every boast he had made would be laid bare. I adjusted my cuffs, feeling the cold weight of the platinum links, silent sentinels waiting to testify. As guests filtered from the chapel, Lucas leaned toward me, voice smooth, a warning disguised as advice. "Uncle Nathan, at the reception later, please keep your composure. Don't make anyone uncomfortable, especially with my boss present." I offered only a faint smile. "Don't worry, Lucas. Today will be memorable." He laughed, certain I meant civility, unaware that his overconfidence was the herald of his undoing. The Harborview Hotel ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers, banquet tables draped in pristine white linen, orchids scattered, glassware catching the lights like miniature stars. The string quartet's melodies floated over conversations, elegant and undisturbed. Every detail, napkins folded as swans, the glint of golden champagne, spoke of perfection, yet I sensed the tension beneath the luxury. I lingered near the bar, glass of wine in hand, observing from a quiet distance. Isabella laughed among friends, radiant, her gown flaring like a white blossom. I allowed myself a brief softening of heart, but reason reminded me. The pivotal moment lay ahead. Across the room, Lucas orchestrated introductions, moving with the ease of someone who believed he commanded everything. He held Isabella's arm, guiding her through circles of colleagues, glancing at me with a subtle arrogance. That old man is irrelevant. I said nothing, sipping wine, letting him grow careless. Then the moment arrived. Charles Lang, CEO of Neurodyne, entered. Silver hair immaculate, presence commanding. The room paused instinctively. Lucas, sensing opportunity, rushed forward, dragging Isabella along, eager to shine before his boss. I followed, deliberate, measured, just enough to stay in the background until the truth revealed itself. Lucas extended a hand, voice loud and confident. "Mr. Lang, allow me to introduce my wife, Isabella, and my father-in-law, Mr. Nathan Whitmore. He's been retired for years, living quietly in Tacoma, a calm man enjoying old age." The words sliced through the room. Some guests smiled politely, others cast subtle, pitying glances. I met Lucas's triumphant gaze, a glint of arrogance in his eyes. Then Charles' attention shifted to the cufflinks on my wrists. He froze. His normally steady eyes widened, then slowly, deliberately, met mine. "Good heavens, Nathan." Nathan Whitmore's silence swept the hall. All eyes followed the recognition. Lucas blinked, disbelief flooding his features. You know him." Charles released his hand and stepped forward, embracing me like a brother lost to time. "Know him." "He is the co-founder of Neurodyne, the man who built this company with me from nothing. Without Nathan, there would be no us today." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Colleagues who had admired Lucas's confidence now stared at him, stunned. Vivian Cho and Mark Davison, veterans I had invited, exchanged quiet, knowing smiles. Lucas's face drained of color, his voice cracking. "No, impossible. He's just a retiree." Charles pivoted, eyes steel. "A retiree?" Nathan laid the foundation of this company. 30 years of work, dozens of patents. Do you have any idea whom you've been insulting? The hall held its breath. Isabella stared at her husband, lips trembling, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. I adjusted my sleeves slightly, letting the chandelier light catch the platinum cufflinks. No words were needed. The truth had spoken. Lucas gaped, searching for a response. I didn't know. He never said. Isabella never told me his voice was swallowed by the murmurs of the crowd. Charles's tone cut like a blade. "On Monday, you report to HR. We'll discuss attitude and respect." In that instant, every pretense Lucas had built collapsed. The arrogant man who had underestimated generations now faced the silent verdict of decades of work, and a father who had orchestrated the perfect revelation. I could not allow a man arrogant enough to scorn the very founder of the company to go unchallenged. Lucas Clark turned pale, his hands trembling as he gripped the champagne glass until it toppled, red wine spreading across the polished floor. Isabella clutched her mouth, eyes wide, caught between terror and heartbreak, and I remained calm, letting the silence of the room stretch like a taut wire. The quartet's melody had vanished. Only the faint clink of cutlery and whispers rippling through the crowd filled the air. Every eye was on Lucas, once hailed as the rising star of sales, now exposed as a fool before hundreds. His lips quivered, his eyes darted, searching desperately for an escape. Then, as if the ground had betrayed him, he collapsed to his knees before Charles Lang and me. Gasps echoed through the hall. His mother, Margaret, sprang from her seat, clutching her purse, her face flaming with shame. Isabella sobbed quietly into her hands, trembling between love and horror. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," Lucas stammered, voice breaking, palm quivering on the cold marble. "I didn't know. If I had known who you were, I would never. Please forgive me." Charles crossed his arms, eyes steel. "You don't need to apologize to me. The man you insulted for months stands right before you." All eyes shifted to me. I inhaled deeply, stepping forward with measured calm. Lucas looked up, bloodshot eyes wide, panic etched into every line of his face, a drowning man grasping for air. "Lucas," I said, voice low but clear enough to carry across the hall, "you called those before you dead weight. You advised your future father-in-law to find part-time work to feel useful. You introduced me to your boss as unemployed. You thought yourself clever, but all you proved was that you measure people by wallets and soup bowls." Sweat ran down his face, throat rasping with broken sound. "I'm sorry. I'll change," he croaked. I stepped closer, gaze slicing like a blade. "If you truly seek forgiveness, rise. Look around this room. Apologize, not only to me, but to all whom you scorned. Apologize for forgetting that respect is the foundation of every man's worth." Trembling, Lucas grasped the edge of a table and rose, turning slowly to face hundreds of eyes. I'm sorry. I was arrogant. I disrespected those who did not deserve it. I was wrong. Please forgive me." His voice cracked, swallowed by murmurs echoing through the room. I let him speak, let him absorb the full weight of humiliation before all who once admired him. When silence fell, I retrieved a white envelope from my breast pocket, Isabella and Lucas's names printed neatly, containing the $75,000 check. I placed it firmly in Isabella's hands. "Isabella, this is your wedding gift. Not to prove wealth, but so you know I have never been a burden. I've always been able to provide for you, no matter who you chose as husband." The room froze. Isabella broke into tears, clutching the envelope to her chest. Lucas bowed his head, shame etched into every taut line of his body. Charles rested a hand on my shoulder, voice warm but firm. "Nathan, you've just taught a lesson no business school could ever impart." Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then swelling into a thunderous wave, echoing not for the man wed that day, but for the father who endured in silence, revealing the truth at the precise moment it mattered most. I turned to Lucas, voice low yet firm, softened with restraint. "Son, today's lesson is costly, but it is also a chance. Never forget, a career can be rebuilt, but honor, once lost, is almost impossible to recover. Treasure this second chance if you truly wish to save yourself." His face, streaked with tears and sweat, nodded repeatedly. Fear remained, but now mingled with a raw, genuine remorse. The wedding feast continued, yet the atmosphere had shifted. No more arrogant laughter, no more pitying glances. Instead, a reverent hush settled, a mix of curiosity and admiration, as if all had witnessed not just a marriage, but a trial of character. Isabella sat beside me, eyes red but shining with clarity. She gripped my hand, trembling, gratitude pouring from every gesture. "Dad, I've never seen the truth so clearly as today." "Thank you for not abandoning me," she whispered. I squeezed her hand gently, voice soft but unwavering. "I made a promise to your mother, and today I kept it. I cannot let you step into marriage without knowing exactly who you're giving your life to." Lucas Clark, after moments of humiliation, sat silently at the table. His expensive tuxedo was now wrinkled, his face expressionless, but I noticed he didn't flee or resist. He bowed his head, absorbing every glance, every silent word around him. Perhaps, for the first time in his life, he learned the value of silence. Charles Lang stepped forward, raising his glass before all the guests. "Today, we don't just celebrate Isabella and Lucas. We are reminded that respect cannot be bought with money or titles. I'm proud to call Nathan Whitmore my partner, but above all, I respect him as a true human being. Applause erupted, warm and sincere. I looked at Lucas. He stood, his voice hoarse. "Thank you all. I know I've been wrong, terribly wrong. But if Isabella still stands by me, if you all give me a chance, I promise to change. Not to save my career, but to be worthy of this family." Isabella, in tears, stepped into her husband's arms. In her eyes I saw love, but also a newfound clarity. She had seen the darkness in him and now knew how to walk with him, not in illusion, but in truth. I placed my hand on Lucas's shoulder, my voice low but no longer sharp. "Second chances are rare. Cherish it." He nodded, his eyes flickering with a humility I'd never seen before. The evening closed with soft music. I stayed back, watching Isabella dance with her husband, her eyes bright yet deeper than ever. I thought of my wife, of the promise I made long ago, and knew I had fulfilled my duty. As I left the hotel, the night breeze swept through the trees by the lake, silver moonlight shimmering on the water. I walked in rare peace, not because I had outplayed Lucas in a game, but because my daughter was protected by the truth. And truth, in the end, is the most human gift a father can give his child. The story ends here today, but what remains isn't the downfall of an arrogant man. It's the lesson that respect is the true foundation of happiness. If you believe truth always finds its voice, please hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Your presence is the strength that helps me tell the stories no one else dares to.